Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of I'm Not Gonna Be Quiet. My name's Danica, and I'm your host. Thank you for joining us. If this is your first time, or if you've been with us since the beginning, it's important for me to share with you that this is a space where folks step into the circle of community to share the path that they have traveled to find liberation after periods of staying silent about their experienced pain and harm. In each interview, we get a chance to hear and learn from our guest what they refuse to be quiet about, what their silence cost them, and the price they have paid for their freedom. I'm here, you're here. Let's get free together. So I'm excited today to welcome Gina Parker Collins, who is a woman that I met, I think, online. I was having some issues at my daughter's school and I was looking for support, and someone referred me to Gina. And can I tell you, since that day, she has been a beacon of light. She has been warmth during times where I'm feeling isolated and out in the cold. And she has given me resource after resource to help me support my journey at a PWI as well as my school. So let me tell you briefly a little bit about Gina, and then I'm going to allow her to introduce herself. So Gina is an independent school mom alum. She's a parent advocate, school advisor, social justice activist, and the founder of RISE. RISE is Resources in Independent School Education. Gina, welcome.
Thank you. Oh, I love going down memory lane with you. Thank you for sharing what our engagement has meant to you and your community. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's pretty wild when you think about it, right? That's how we met, just on a humbug, like, help, I'm drowning. Here's a life vest. And yeah, I'm not drowning anymore. So that's our
Thank you.
history.
Yeah, we keep each other afloat.
Yeah, that's community. So welcome. Gina,
Thank you.
before we jump into the nitty gritty, I want to give you an opportunity to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and about Rise. Can you also just share where we can find you?
Sure. So, if I'm to start out with pronouns, I'm she and her. Again, my name is Gina. I am a mom of two brilliant and beautiful Black children. I mean, they're adults now, but they're still my babies. And I was taken to this space of networking with other Black and Brown families in independent school cultures, which are historically white, predominantly white learning institutions, pre-K through 12, because I wanted more for their education. I did not want their education to be a statistic. I just knew that they needed more. So I came across this space, we applied, we got in, and then it was, what the hell did I get myself into? What did I get my children into? And I just knew then that I had to show up for them. I had to walk ahead of them. I had to walk with them. I had to walk behind them when I have shown them ways to advocate for themselves in spaces that might not recognize or perhaps acknowledge their genius and could potentially rob them of their joy. So Rise was started really, by that gumption, and also an administrator at the school saw my advocacy and said, "Hey, listen, I have a problem. I'm really trying to grapple with something that happened to a young boy who, young man now who went through the lower school is now in the upper school, is being asked to leave. And I know if his parents had showed up, that whatever went down would have went down differently. I wish there was a Bible I can give Black and brown families. And I said, oh, I can do that. So Rise was born literally out of my desire to be full in community, to belong before I felt like I belonged. And this ask of an administrator. So Rise, RIISE, at 4Rise, actually at the number 4, RIISE, on Instagram and Facebook, mainly hanging out on Instagram, engaging with people. But RISE stands for Resources in Independent School Education, and we are a network for Black families and brown families who are trying to navigate independent school culture. We're grounded in radical love and self-expression, and we also honor our cultural richness, our perseverance in these spaces, and of course our wellness. And we work with independent schools as well as individual families.
That's a lot of work for one person, and then building it out to make a community, which I know you've done. I just want to thank you. I know parents thank you regularly. I want to thank you for what you've given, not just to me, but to our community. It's so important that we share, right? We lift as we climb. When you talked about being inspired to create something so that your children were safe and they weren't left with these traumatized school experiences, I felt that. I felt that in all of my being when you said to walk ahead of them. That's what we do, right? You know, Ella Baker talked about give light and people will find their way. That's what we do by being trailblazers and pathfinders. So I
Yes.
appreciate that. That clearly it resonated in my spirit, but I think it is a basic tenet of building community. So thank you.
Yes. Well, you're welcome. Thank you for being part of that community. So it may appear that I do this by myself. Sometimes, you feel, a little alone in spaces when perhaps you should just be grateful you are where you are, right? We know how highly selective these and rejective of these independent school admission processes can be. But we're here, and it's getting in is one thing, but it's really how well are we getting through, right? Are we thriving, or are we just surviving? And my people are people of joy and resilience, but at the same time we have to be able to speak up for ourselves to get what it is that we need to support our journey. And so we support families getting in, but we also support families while we're in to show up and then create, like you, Danica. You've created great spaces in your community for parents to acknowledge that there's both pride and guilt in this choice that we make around education.
Ashe, thank you. I appreciate you honoring what I've done, just like I honor yours. Thank you. Well, all right. So I have an idea, what we're going to be talking about, but let's just jump into it. What have you refused to be quiet about?
The experience of Black and brown families in independent school spaces.
Yeah, that makes sense. It reverberated in my head when you said, space to talk about the pride and the guilt. So, what has been your experience at, being a person of color at a PWI?
It's been empowering for sure. I believe that my level of activism has been realized in an independent school community, and that has everything to do with the mission of our schools. If you read a school's mission, if you're looking at an independent school, please look at their mission, because that can be one of your beacons as you move through that space to make sure that you leverage every aspect of this experience. So for me, it's been empowering. I have been able to network and learn, right? Quite frankly, this school that I put my children in, that I enroll them in, is nothing like the school I went to. So I'm having the opportunity to be a student again. So I take in as many opportunities for development, parent development that many of our schools do offer. So I do love the resources of an independent school. It feels good. I mean, you feel important, but at the same time, you can look around and not see many mirrors of yourself, students, faculty, families. And you wonder, why that is. And then, you come to some realizations around capitalism, around class, around race. And you have to stare that in the face, right? You can try and ignore it, but to do so is dangerous for our children, particularly our littles when they can't articulate, why is it that I don't see many people that look like me, right? That signals something. And I want to disrupt those signals. But also at the same time, being a kindergartner in an independent school is just, wow, it's full of wonder, right? Again, the resources and the faculty and their delight at teaching, at being an educator. We just have to do a little bit more work to make sure that they understand that there's also this child that has cultural experiences that are different than the majority in the class. And I just don't want this minoritized experience to become pathological, right? I want that joy and that genius to remain up front, but it just takes work. And it takes speaking up, and it takes not being quiet. So when you see something, you say something. You can do that.
That's, I imagine, what can be a challenge for a lot of parents, particularly when you are in numerically the minority, right? Being able to come into that space, find joy, but then not see yourself. And then what happens when things start happening? Because I imagine for many parents, including myself and those that I have spoken with at my child's school, there's some hesitation, there's some fear, there's some anxiety about speaking up, if your child is harmed, or if as the adults are harmed at a PWI. And so I'm curious, what has been your experience with, your children having, some trouble, some challenging times, or other parents where they've felt, a little isolated, but motivated? Because on one side of the coin is, if I speak up, there could be possible retaliation. There could be counseling out. There could be isolation for my child, and etc. And then the other side is, if I speak up about, an uncomfortable experience or something that didn't land well, then it gets to be acknowledged and possibly corrected. And we do that collaboratively, but that's quite the gamble. So I'm curious, you have a long history of having children in the PWI. What has been the harm or hurt that your family has experienced, and how has that, been rectified?
Yes. Definitely an independent school OG. That's what I like to call myself. School kindergarten through 12th grade. So I've had my children on that kindergarten through grade 12 journey. So as I look back, I was never afraid, and I want to encourage families to not be afraid. I can empathize with families who might feel hesitant about speaking up when they are experiencing real and or perceived moments where they feel marginalized. I'm known as the independent school OG, so I do have institutional knowledge on my own personally, as well as through RISE, the community of RISE. And our stories are generally the same, right? And it is emblematic of race in America, period. And then you add on the different layers that an independent school would have. Definitely experienced moments of harm that were uncomfortable to acknowledge, Danica, because it's like I put my children in this space, right? I did this. But my husband often reminds me, what was the alternative? because they are going to experience harm wherever they go as Black children. So being in a space where my power as a consumer, okay, so that's the difference. I'm paying to have the educational experience that I want. There's just certain things that come along with it. But again, if we go back to the mission of our schools, we can hang on that, right? And be able to speak up and also know that there are other people in this space, that educators in particular, that and administrators who are intentional about being the spaces that they're supposed to be for everyone. And I also know that if I speak up for my Black child, everyone is going to benefit because of that, right? Everyone benefits when you take care of the most marginalized in the group, right? A matter of fact, the other day, someone mentioned, you know what? I want more white parents in their decisions around which independent school they're going to send their kids to ask the question, how are your Black children doing here? Because, you know, if the Black children are doing well, all children are doing well.
Right. That's the floor.
So, yes, have I experienced harm? Have my children experienced harm? I'm still digesting that. My defense has been to speak out on their behalf. But that does not mean that we have not been affected by it. And my children haven't been affected by it. One more than the other. My girl more so than my son. But yeah, I'm still working on articulating what that was. What was that harm, Gina? Tell us, what was that?
Yeah.
And Danica, I'm still I respect my children's privacy. I respect my privacy. But it's, you know, it's not an anomaly. What I've experienced, what my children have experienced, are not, you know, again, other people have as well. But I do know that the benefits have far outweighed, and we're all better for this advocacy work that we have done. My children are better because they know how to ask for what it is they need and to speak up when things are not right.
Yeah,
And
I
to
appreciate
expect
you.
that change can happen. Expect the change can happen.
Right. I appreciate you sharing all of that, because it just pulls me closer into into a community. So I think when you have these just terrible experiences, these harmful, these violent experiences, um, it doesn't just happen in a vacuum, right? It doesn't happen, you say it, you name it, and then it's over. There's this just path of healing, and a part of the healing part is sitting with it. So I appreciate you saying that. I also just appreciate the heaviness that comes with um, knowing that as a parent, this is what you chose for your child. I feel like you are mirroring where I am currently and a whole bunch of other parents. So thank you again for just being, being you and being kind of the light in the room to let people know that you're not alone. There's a way out. There are alternatives. Um, and also highlighting wherever you go, racism is there. It is that
Absolutely.
pervasive. You can't escape it. You can't outrun it. It's there.
Yep.
So you could choose another school. You will
Public,
find it
charter,
there.
predominantly Black, you know, it's baked into the system. Again, what I do know, though, my experience has been that I have had impact in my school community. My school community is not the same as it was when
Yes.
I arrived. And I didn't do that by myself, but I spoke up. I built relationships. Some of my most endearing relationships have come out of independent schools. And it's not just my Black and brown folks. They're my white comrades as well, my white friends, my, you know, it's the entire community. So when I go back to that empowerment piece, that is what can happen in an independent schools. In an independent school, change can actually happen on a dime, especially if the school has the financial resources to make things work better. They're willing to
Yeah.
invest in that. They're willing to sit down and talk about curriculum. They're willing to create an affinity group. They're willing to acknowledge the harm and the hurt. They're willing to recognize genius and joy, right? So I'm not stuck in pathology. I refuse to be. A matter of fact, it's like you all need to recognize, that we put the in community. You do know that, right?
Ashe. Ashe and amen.
Right. So we are a think tank for our schools. Our social capital is strong. Our intellectual capital is strong. And financially, some of us, can hang out with the big folks in the independent schools. But we're talking about, the 1% for the most part, right? The way tuition costs are. But what we are doing is we're creating folks we're developing young people to be able to not be afraid to take risks. We're creating opportunities for curiosity so that our children will be in, hopefully, a better earning bracket than most of us. So it's about creating this new legacy, but at the same time understanding that it's not just about the money. It's about the impact that we're going to have for good in this world.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a, it's an important learning lesson. It's certainly not one that we want to come their way too early, but we can't control it. And so I appreciate you highlighting that there's loss, right? When harm is done, there's loss. But coupled with that is change, because that's who we are instinctually. I think it's just built into our DNA. Our ancestors have just given it to us via their own trauma. We are people, we're change makers. And so I think, I appreciate you highlighting that. You're going to have some tough times, but there's a way out and there's a way to recover, and you are going to make that space better.
And I would add to that recovery piece is speaking up. Because when you don't speak up, there's harm that happens internally. There's harm on top of harm. Knowing who you are and whose you are. You just talked of, that DNA, that ancestral DNA. We know how to make things better. And we just have to be confident enough in our consumerism, paying for tuition in an independent school, to say, I am the most proximate to the challenge, so you need to listen to me. Like, I have the answer. Right? And so when we are looking at independent schools, we have to know that, and when we're enrolled in independent schools, that balance of, pride and guilt, if you look for the joy and the genius in yourself and you're willing to express that, that's part of the healing process. That's part of the healing process. No, you will see me and you will acknowledge me when we're passing each other in the hall. I mean, look at this, So I think the healing definitely comes with us. A little bit of therapy helps too. Okay. I mean, I did offer that to my children. I don't know if I would have offered that in another educational setting.
That's brilliant.
But it is about development.
Yeah, I think that's helpful for parents to hear, because there are things that will transpire that you will not know about, and you might learn well after it happens. But if you offer therapy, knowing that they are going into an environment where, they might be a target, or there might be some implicit bias, or there might be some blind spots of, administrators, staff, etc. So I think that's really helpful.
Students
as
too.
well.
I mean, like, really,
yes.
Let's talk about that. I mean, I believe that our schools are doing the work. I don't know if our peer families are doing the work, right? So, but you're going to find that in the workplace. You're going to find that in higher learning. You're going to find that hierarchy, that lack of development in all sorts of settings. And so how do we rise above that? We speak up about the harm, we acknowledge it, and we ask for what it is that we need to heal from it.
I love that. I love that. I'm even now, the wheels are turning because I definitely for myself have come in contact with parents who there are parents who are just happy to be there. And when they're just happy to be there because they feel like they've been gifted something and they don't really see themselves as a gift, I see that type of parent struggling the most to protect their child by using their voice, right? And doing it out loud, transparently. So I think everything that you're sharing is so helpful. One, these are the things I'm collecting. Say it, name it. Two, I'm also loving plan for there to be some harm, right? Just plan for it and engage your child in therapy in case there's something that they're not bringing to you that's happening on a peer-to-peer level. I think that's brilliant. There's a difference in planning. There's a very, when I speak to parents now, the RISE toolkit that you're giving me, this will be a part of my talk. Expect for there, because in general, right, if we just take the race variable out, right, take class out, we take all of these variables out, there's just always conflict with children, with human beings. Same with adults, right? There's going to be
Conflict.
conflict, and some of it will be worked out in a really therapeutic and a safe way, and then some of it will just get ignored, which isn't helpful, and then some just doesn't get worked out well at all. So planning for that and putting your children in therapy or some therapeutic process, whether it's a support group for kids at PWIs, I think that's brilliant.
Or the affinity groups are there. There are different programs that are out here. But you brought up something, Danica, about conflict. I mean, when it comes down to it, all of the things that can create conflict still are just conflict. And when we know how to handle conflict, which is to speak up about it, but first build relationship and build trust so that when conflict comes up, like, we don't need to wait for it, prepare for it, as you said, and you do that by building relationships with people who can help get rid of that conflict. And when that conflict happens, those relationships are already built and it is taken care of, right? But we have to help those parents who are just so happy to be there, or the parent that says, well, I'm not focused on race because I don't have to be, for whatever reason that might be. They could be, I make enough money, I'm hanging out with the big boys, I don't see it until something happens.
Right.
Because it will. There will be something, and if you don't know as a parent, then you're not doing your job. You should expect, I don't think you should have to just drill your children every day. I mean, my kids were the kids that were like, oh, Ma, are we talking about race again? Yes, we are. Because it's reality. But I, at the same time, want you to know that you do belong. And you should be able to show up as your authentic self, even without the many mirrors and windows. And that's another part of what RISE does, is, just helping with other organizations, let families of color know that these schools are for you too. And when people come back, that were parents or students 15 years ago, and they see what a lot of our schools look like now, they are blown away. Because we continue to speak not only to the school, but to our communities to say, you do have options. You have options. And we're here. Come on, check it out and be part of communities that have such impact. And you can do that on a number of different levels. Not everybody's going to be a Gina. Not everybody's going to be a Danica. You might like that, I move with the velvet hammer, right? Like I'll sit on the board. Get on the board. Or I'll be part of the PA. Or I'll help out in the library, or I will do the next fundraiser, or whatever it is. Find your spot. Find your spot. It's really important.
Yeah, another another gem, another tool to add to this kit is just do something. You have to do something. And if you're in community, find your lane. Because I mean, everything you're saying is spot on. I think it's timely. I think it's going to help the people along the continuum, right? The people who are used to being the frontline folks. And then the people who are comfortable being a little bit more quiet verbally, but they're moving out loud. I think that's really helpful because I think what parents don't recognize, which is what you shared, at some point it will be your turn. Your family will experience some type of disruption, some type of harm, and you will need the support of your community. So if you join the community and find your place, what we end up doing is we stretch the protection. Protection isn't just, when our children are with us or when they see us or when they see, their best friend's family, but protection is when they see all of these brown faces, like you said, in the library volunteering, chaperoning a trip, um, in the school committee, the school board meetings, a teacher who has a child there and is taking meetings with the head of school and etc. If you join community, then it makes us stronger. It makes us healthier. It makes us happier. It makes us more resilient. And it gives you that same support. I love that. I hope every parent out there who's thinking about sending their children to a PWI or who have children at a PWI hear this and hear it well, because what you're sharing will transform their lives. It will transform their children's experiences at a PWI. I'm curious, for the parents who struggle saying what they've experienced and saying it in community so that they can get support, what do you think they lose when they just go it alone and get nowhere with it?
I think they lose the investment that they've made. I mean, it still does come down to, I mean, if we want to just talk about the economics of it, if you have to protect your investment. You have to protect your investments. And so we have our financial investment, and then we have our biggest investment, our children. So what they lose is that they lose that investment, and they lose out on the opportunity of increasing that investment, on getting a return on their investment, right? So I want to have a good time. I want to have a good time too. I want to network with people that I would not have been networking with had I not been at an independent school. I mean, that's some real talk. We are going to school with some heavy hitters across gender, race, culture. Like, people are making things happen. And they want to make things happen for their kids. So there's that too. So I just feel like if you don't say anything on, on the macro level, those are some of the investments that you're missing out on. But your health is not going to fare that much better. Your heart, your wellness, then you're just surviving. You're not thriving. So I think also just keeping that. I mean, like, why did you come to an independent school to begin with? You had some vision. Grab that back, right? We need to dream again. We need to dream big again. Because dreaming big was, I'm applying. I know what the odds are. I know only less, like 10 to 14% of the entire country sends their kids to independent schools, right? How many seats are in a class? Depending, 25 per section of the 3 kindergarten classes, like 75 kids they're taking on average for kindergarten out of thousands of applications. If you got in, come on now, like, what you doing? What are you doing? Yeah. When you leave that school, they should know your family came through, not just because you spoke up, but because you showed up. You invested your greatest asset, your children, your beautiful, brilliant Black children, into this space and made it better because of them.
Ashe and amen. I love everything that you're sharing, Because sometimes, it's like we're all different learners. And so you reach people when you talk about their pockets. You reach people when you talk about, building up your children. You reach them when you talk about networking. There's so many avenues to reach people, but the outcome is the same. Your children are protected. Your children become resilient. Your children shine, and your children build or get to be built into confident, intelligent, self-assured, high self-esteem having, curious, beautiful human beings. That's the goal. So I appreciate you kind of giving us a roadmap on how to show up, find your lane, how to show up. That's beautiful. So I guess in closing, recognizing that you are the OG of independent schools, you've done it, you've written a book, you know what the rules are, you know the blind spots. What do you want to leave with our listeners? Like, what do you hope they'll take away from all the amazing things that you shared?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that we're worthy of an exceptional education. We are, as part of our legacy, to bring our authentic selves into these spaces, to flash that social capital, and to know at the end of it all, you have done what you set out to do. You had a vision for your children's education, for their experiences, and you invested a lot. So I want, finally, us to just give ourselves some grace with this, to trust that we are walking the path that our ancestors set out for us, right? We don't need to play it small at all. Don't play it small.
That was it right there. If you said nothing else, don't play it small. That was it. I feel like you took us to church, to mosque, you took us everywhere. Like, walk the path that our ancestors led, that they provided. Walk that path. Yes, ma'am.
And at the same time, I mean, you get to also take part in the, I went to Howard, and by the time I got to Howard, it felt like we were in that kind of like me generation. It was all about, there was no social activism going on. Reagan was, kind of in the mix. And so South Africa was where things were happening, right? Like there was no protest. I wanted to protest. I felt like I missed out. Like I was born during the civil rights movement. So I was a kid, but that's still part of who I am, right? Like I needed to express that somewhere. So I was in the majority at Howard, so that felt that space of higher learning felt really good and nurturing to me, but I also felt like, but where's my fight? What am I, what's my cause here? And it's at an independent school, honestly, and of course, where we are as a country, with the racial reckoning, we are once again recognizing that, no, it's not all good here. We got a lot of work to do. But at an independent school, you just have that opportunity to say, excuse me. And people respond to that. Yes. Remember that mission statement?
Right.
Let's sit down and have a conversation because I want to partner with you. So that level of activism is exciting to me. It's exciting to me. I'm speaking on my, behalf. I feel energized when I know that when I walk away from here, that I've had a hand at impacting this space socially.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, and thank you for the work that you're doing, because it's real labor, right? It can be emotionally and physically exhausting.
Ooh, so take care of yourself too. Yes. It's a labor of love, but we do. And thank you for that, because you do, in this activist way of being very active, I do have to remind myself, Danica,
yes,
take a step back. sometimes you just have to take a step back for your own self-preservation, and that's okay, because guess what, it's going to be here next week.
Right. It's not going anywhere. Yeah. Yeah. I have to thank you for the work that you've done, for the work that you're doing. It's transforming people's lives, like whole families. And I wish for you, because you have this spirit of, we gonna get this right, we gonna protect these babies. That's your calling. And I wish for you to be met with folks who want to be agreeable, to be met with folks who want to partner with you, to be met with folks who want to follow your lead, because you deserve that. Your labor is not gone. It's unnoticed, right? It's greatly appreciated. Um, it's needed. It's necessary. And so I just wanted to take that moment to give you that light, because I know what this work is, and I know what it can do to you if you're not alert and have some plans in place to protect your wellness.
Yeah. Well, that happens when there are people like you, Danica, and folks are out here. I don't mind meeting the opposition either. I just kind of like move out of their way, though. I just get to the person and the people who are have the same mindset, right? Like, so there's strength in numbers. And the more people who are jumping into this space, like you with this podcast, like with you and your affinity group at school, and schools having, parents making sure there are affinity groups if there aren't any. I mean, like, that level of strength and power, I feel that, right? So there are people who led before me, and there'll be people after me. But we have to also start not being silent with ourselves.
Right.
It's like, I see something in you, mom, of the second grade student. Like, I'm moving out of this position. I think you should consider it. Oh, I don't have time. I don't have time either. But we make the time. We have to make the time, right? So we have to inspire and encourage one another we have to create a plan. We have to be strategic about who we see in community that can be that next, who can be that successor, right? That succession planning is important. It's not about Gina. It's not just about, it's about us. It's about us. And so there's plenty of space for all of us.
Right.
There's plenty of space. We all come with our gifts and our talents that we bring to the table. And so we need to embrace that too. So I honor you, and I thank you for not being quiet. We have our podcast Articulating. We both, between articulating and I'm not being quiet, are talking about voice.
Right.
We are griots, right?
We are. We are
called response people.
Ashe. Yes.
So, and we lead with radical love. And we're all going to do things differently. I mean, I think of the successors, like that. There are some successors or currently, current parent leaders who, you think that you and I like to make sure that our voices are heard. There are some who speak very loudly, who some people want to say, okay, well, this is how we should be doing it. This is how, the respectability politics comes into play. And that's one of the things I want us to be careful of.
Yes.
All bring something to the table. There's different ways of expression. And the fact that you're coming to the table is enough. Be yourself when you come to the table. Of course, there's certainly better ways to communicate than others, but by all means, communicate. We'll figure that out once we get here.
Right. Just show up. Just show up and be ready to talk.
Just as you are. Just as you are. So thank you. Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you again, Gina Parker Collins, founder of Rise. You've left us with so many action steps. You've left us with a vision. You've left us feeling in community. And that's important because if you feel like you're in community, then you're more inclined to take stake and to stretch it and make it be what you need it to be. So we're rising together. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing today.
We are doing
Right?
that. Doing that today and tomorrow. The day
Yes.
after that. And we're going to inspire others to do the same. So thank you, Danica. Thank you for being in community with Rise. Traveling from Philly to be in New York City at Barnard College last year this time for our Rise Parent Power Conference. And we want to continue that exchange of ideas and presence. So
Yeah, I loved it. Anytime you need me, I'm there. I loved it. I love being in community
same
with
here
you and
coming
your
down to
folks.
Philly. Same with Philly,
Yes. Thank you everyone for tuning in. I appreciate you following. I appreciate you leaving comments. This is how we build community. And so until next time.